My name is Jeff Newburn, for those of you who don't know me, and I am going to talk about quieting ourselves today. And what the experts tell us is the number one predictor of mental health is the ability to quiet ourselves. So if we're not, well, speaking of quiet, or lack of, so it turns out that this is this big skill that is really important, because if we can't quiet ourselves, it's bad for our souls, it's bad for our bodies, having cortisol course through our whole body. It's bad for relationships. So, how many people here have ever experienced a situation where you're kind of upset about something and wound up, and it just kind of gets to be such a big deal inside of you that it becomes like the main thing that's going on, that you can't really think of anything else? How many people have experienced that? All right, so that is, or how many times have you had something that's upset you, so it's really kind of become obsessed that you just can't think of anything but that one thing? Have anybody ever experienced that? So that is, if you've ever experienced that, you're not alone. And I'm going to see if, is my PowerPoint on? All right. So when it is, all right, we're getting it. So I'll just share this verse from the Psalms. It says, "When my anxious thoughts multiply within me, your comfort delights my soul." So imagine that you've got an anxious thought, and then you add another one and another. Now you're starting to multiply. Whoa, that's big, isn't it? And the NIV says, when anxiety was great in me. Actually, when I think about anxious thoughts multiplying, that sounds like a panic attack. I mean, it's just like, whoa, this is so big. So that happens. So a couple of factoids on anxiety. An anxiety disorder is when you have big anxious thoughts that are so big that it's debilitating. Like, we can't do everything that we need to do in life, and that condition persists for more than 6 months, then that's defined as an anxiety disorder. So 1 in 3 of us have been in that place in our lives where anxiety is a big enough issue that we've had it for more than 6 months. And half of that group is experiencing that condition right now. So anxiety is the biggest mental health issue that we have in this country. It's a big deal. And 1 in 10 of us has had a panic attack this year. So here's a little graphic. So if the circle is everybody, the first group that's in blue is people that are anxious but are unaware of it. Now, actually, you could say there's some people that have never been anxious ever. I would say maybe that's true, or maybe you're like me and you're just not aware of what's going on inside of you. So what I'd say about myself is, years ago I learned about Socrates' 4 temperament types, and one of them's phlegmatic. So phlegmatic is easygoing, no highs, no lows. I go, it's great being a phlegmatic. No drama, no highs and lows, just steady. Now, I thought that was awesome, but The trouble is, if I couldn't experience emotions, I was not able to be there with somebody else. So when Paul writes, weep with those who weep, I didn't know how to do that because I was so shut down. And so I'm on the journey from becoming unaware to aware. So it wasn't that long ago I said to Sharon, I was anxious about this, and she said, you've never in your life said that you were anxious about something. I mean, this just happened recently, so it's like, wow, maybe I've gone from the blue to the green, who knows? So it wasn't, she would say, it's not that I haven't seen you be anxious, it's just that you haven't been willing to say that you were anxious. Or you haven't even been in touch with yourself. So that's part of the journey I'm on. And then the yellow is the 30% of people that have had anxiety for 6 months and it's been debilitating. That's 1 in 3 of us. And then the 15% or so is somebody that's experiencing that right now. Okay, so I don't know which of those 4 that you're in. If you're in the aware disorder sometime or disorder now, this message is for you because what we want to do is give practical things on what you can do when anxiety is a big issue for you. And if that's not an issue, there's lots of people around you that have this as an issue, and so part of what we want to do is talk about what's helpful and what you can do. Okay, so there's this famous psychologist named Bob Newhart, and you might have seen this video clip that we're going to watch here, but let's see what this guy has to say.
I'm going to say 2 words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just 2 words. We find most people can remember them.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, you're there.
Stop it! I'm sorry?
Stop it!
Stop it?
Yes, S-T-O-P, new word, I-T.
So, what are you saying?
It's funny. I say 2 simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing you're saying. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is English. Stop it.
So, I should just stop it.
There you go.
But I'm compelled to. My mom used to call me fatty.
No, we don't go there.
But I've been having this dream.
No, we don't go there either.
But my horoscope did say...
We definitely don't go there. Just stop it.
Anxiety disorder, and she says, I need your help. And so that wasn't that helpful? I mean, it's quite simple, right? Let's see. Can you advance the slide? Because I'm not able to do that. All right. So, and actually, because we had the buffering thing, maybe you can pull up the next video and start that buffering while I'll introduce it. But, so Chris Corsi, who spoke at Tribal last year, he's going to speak at Tribal again this year, put on a free webinar just last week on anxiety. And we're going to, if the technology works, we're going to watch a few minutes of that. But it's called Stopping the Cycle of Anxiety, and here's how he defines anxiety. It is trying to solve a right hemisphere problem with the left hemisphere. So let me, and as soon as that video is up, so I'll just keep talking until.
Okay. Anxiety is just the brain continuously calculating its resources versus the demands of the situation. And so my brain's trying to predict the future. And so this is, really two things happen here when my brain's trying to do the math. Do I have what I need to deal with this? So one thing that's happening is my brain's asking this question: how fast will I burn up my capacity? So can I quiet myself? Can I still be myself under these conditions? Can I be still? So my brain is kind of doing the math. Do I have the juice in my battery to deal with what's going on here? And how long can I handle this? So that's one thing my brain's trying to figure out. The second is, what are my external resources here? So that means, how relationally connected am I with other people right now? So first question, do I have what I need here to withstand this and to manage this and to be myself under these conditions? Then the other question is, do I have those resources or those people who are with me while I'm dealing with this? And so this leads to kind of the big conclusion that when we feel alone, anxiety becomes louder, because I'm unable to manage what I feel as effectively when I feel alone and I don't have the resources. So do I have the bandwidth to deal with this and still rest? Do I have the relationships to be able to navigate this terrain? So part of what makes anxiety blow up in some ways for us is really kind of what has been lacking. So anxiety is a sign that something was lacking here in some way, shape, or form. And so my brain is looking at past relational failures that really interfered with me being able to regulate what I feel. So my brain says, I don't want to touch that stove again because that hurt, that was bad. And my brain's also calculating these current relational failures. So do I have what I need to handle this right now? So that's why sometimes we get anxious about what's around the corner, because our brain's actually looking back. So when there's something, I didn't have what I needed here, then my brain is saying, well, I don't want to go through that again. And so we start to become anxious about those things. So it's ultimately, can I manage what I feel now? Can I manage what's around the corner? And this is a really helpful lens, Christy, as we think about this, that's ultimately what my brain is just constantly calculating and doing the math on these things. Do I have what I need to be myself under these conditions?
Okay, so if you want to go back to the PowerPoint now. So basically what I just heard Chris saying is what happens with anxiety is that we are, once you advance it, and then I'll see if this works after that. Okay, next one. Okay. So we got something going on. The right hemisphere is our feeling part. And so we're feeling concern, we're feeling an upset, and the left side of our brain is saying, okay, what resources do we have? Am I going to be all right? Some bad stuff's happened in the past. Based on that, I'm concerned about what's ahead. And the left part of the brain is spinning. It's stuck, kind of like the wheels of my car out there in the snow bank. It can't go, it's turning, but it can't go anywhere. And it's come to the conclusion, I don't have what I need. And if it feels alone, nobody's going to help me, and that is a terrible place to be, and we're just spinning our wheels. So, I mean, that's interesting that that's how he defines anxiety. So, and we can't solve a right brain problem with the left brain. So there's a lot of well-meaning helpfulness that we try and give each other so somebody's anxious and we go, "Whoa, man, I don't want you to be anxious." We're sincere and well-meaning. We go, "Well, we want to help you. So here's a list of 3 things that only make it worse." Okay, so one is, well, you just need more faith. You know, if you would just muster up more faith, just trust God, then you wouldn't have this going on. And that seems like really good advice, right? Or, well, just read the Bible and do what it says. That's a good one. Or, this is from Bob Newhart, just do it. I mean, just stop doing something that you don't want. I mean, it's just like, isn't it that easy? You just stop it. But those are all left brain solutions when the issue is the right brain, which can't, it deals in feelings, not words, and it feels what it feels, but none of these solutions help. In Chris's webinar, he said, you know, you can have the faith to move mountains, but if you're out in the ocean and you don't know how to swim, guess what's going to happen? You're going to sink. Because that's a different issue than having faith. You have to have some training and skills in order to be able to swim. Okay, so how do we, this is in your notes. If you're interested in learning more about anxiety, the thing that we saw a clip from, there's a free webinar. And on your notes here is this on how you can see it. Okay, so we're going to talk specifically about how to quiet yourself. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here is a psalm that David wrote, and highlighted in the middle there is, "I have calmed and quieted myself." And David wrote this when he was king of Israel. So when he says, "I do not concern myself with great matters," actually he had, he was running the most powerful country in the world at that time. And he had a lot of responsibility, and yet he said, I'm whatever responsibilities and cares and concerns I have learned to set them aside, and I have calmed and quieted myself. So he doesn't really tell us how to do it here, but it's more that it can be done. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about why am I talking about this morning. So a week ago yesterday, I was upset. I mean, I was pretty upset. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go out to Happy Jack and go cross-country skiing. I pulled into Thai City and I go, I forgot to bring my skis. Oh, well. So there's plenty of trails at Happy Jack. So I was walking along. And I did talk to my brother. And here's what my brother did. He attuned to me. I mean, I shared what was going on with me. He validated my feelings. He didn't say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You know, if you really loved Jesus and had faith in God, you wouldn't be struggling with that. I mean, he validated my feelings. He didn't offer me any advice. Even though he's a wise man and he could have said a lot, he was with me in my pain. And there's something that happened. I felt known, I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt understood. And remember the difference between like the left brain giving advice, telling you what to do, a left brain solution doesn't help when the pain is on the right brain. Here's what does help. When we feel known, seen, heard, and understood by somebody. Now that can be God, it can be another person. So that's another topic we want to talk about another time, is how we can be there for others. But the right brain solution for somebody being upset is to be with them in their pain. And sometimes we're blessed to have somebody like my brother that I could process that with. Sometimes we got to do it with God. It's nice when you have both. And then I also thought about Psalm 27. And so I went home Saturday and just camped out in that passage. And we're going to kind of walk through from Psalm 27 in a practical way how David went from fear to being confident. So let's walk through that. So Psalm 27 starts off, and you read these first few verses, whoa, that's a super faith. I mean, whom shall I fear? Whom shall I dread? I got this whole host, this army camped outside, and I'm not afraid. Even though war is rising up, in spite of this, I will be confident. So this is amazing. But the interesting thing about Psalm 27 that we'll learn is, even though this is at the beginning of the psalm, he got there eventually, but he was in a tough place that we're going to find out about in a little bit. Okay, so this section is what I would call about the Emmanuel Lifestyle. So the Emmanuel Lifestyle, okay, there's times when we're upset and anxious, but there's things that we can do on a daily and weekly basis, a lifestyle that really can help build capacity and build a foundation. And so if we want to know how to get out of being upset, there's some things I'm going to talk about that help in that moment, but there's also this whole background of things that we have as a lifestyle that can really help. And this is central. So basically David's saying, hey, I've got one priority that's above every other one. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Every day. All the days of his life. To behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple. My favorite verse about growth and transformation is in 2 Corinthians 3, where Paul says, as we behold God, we become like him. We're transformed into his likeness from glory to glory. That's exactly what David was doing here. He was saying, what is God like? I want to know God. I want to be known by God. And I want to have this rich, full, satisfying relationship. So this was his lifestyle that really helped ground him in who he was. Okay, now we get to what's called the day of trouble. Okay? So, something happened in David's life, and it's whoa, this is big. This is big, and the problem seems so big, I'm overwhelmed by it. So it's the word picture I get is, here's David, here's the problem is bigger than what he can handle. So this whole thing that we were talking about, Chris Corsi's definition of anxiety is, I don't have the resources. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. That seems like David was feeling that in the day of trouble. So first of all, he recognized that something was going on that was bigger than him. He was able to name it and said, okay, I'm in trouble now, what should I do? And what he did is he didn't walk, he ran to the tabernacle, the secret place of his tent, and he hid there. So part of the reason I know he was scared is you don't hide unless you're scared, right? You hide because, wow, this thing is too big for me. This is too big for me. And something amazing happened. We don't see it right here. We will see it a little bit later in the psalm. What happened when David took refuge in the Lord's tent? So a couple skills that Chris talks about in his workshop is one is the skill of learning to quiet ourselves. And another is to see what God sees. That's also called the skill of God's sight. And something happened when David was with God, kind of hiding out, going like, yikes. And somehow he was able to quiet himself and see what God's perspective was. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. So when he came out of this place of hiding, he said, he will lift me up on a rock, and now my head will be lifted above my enemies. So it's like it used to be the problem was bigger than David, and now he is like above the problem. So something happened inside of David that changed his perspective. And then he said, I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I'll sing praises to the Lord. So another skill is share joy. Joy comes from when we know that somebody's glad to be with us. So we get joy when we realize that God is glad to be with us. We get joy with other people when we see that they're glad to be with us. And appreciation as a lifestyle, it's really hard when we're struggling with something that seems big to express appreciation. And honestly, it's appreciation for what, because we don't feel it right then, but it's like, God, I thank you that you are going to work this thing out. Even though I'm not experiencing it right now, I am expressing my appreciation that you are in control and you will work it out. So this is an interesting thing. Appreciation, when we're in the middle of it, is a way of making a declaration and an expression of faith of what's going to happen. Okay, we go on here. So David's crying out to God. And then God says to David, seek my face. So what's happening, David's in this day of trouble, and I think that God's okay with us being in trouble. I think God's okay when the circumstances seem bigger than we are, because we come to the end of our rope and we have to rely on God. And so he gives us the invitation. Why don't you come to me? Why don't you seek my face? And David responds, your face, O God, I shall seek. So he didn't just stop at, wow, I'm in the day of trouble and that sucks. He went on to say, okay, but I am going to use this as something that pushes me into seeking God. So David says, don't hide your face from me. Don't turn away from me in anger. You've been my help. So why was David concerned about God turning his face from him? Well, let's look at the next verse. Whoops. All right, there we go. Do not abandon or forsake me, for my father and mother have forsaken me. Wow. Whatever happened to David? Now, we don't know a lot about David's family of origin, but we do know that when Samuel came to David's family, okay, so Samuel was the most important person in the whole nation. He came to David's father's house and his mother's house, and everybody was invited but David. All his brothers were there, and so Samuel knew that one of the sons was there, and he goes, "No, it's not that. Do you have any other sons around here?" Oh yeah, we have David. He's like out tending the sheep. Do you think that David felt that his father and mother had forsaken him? I mean, there was something going on there that was very unhealthy. Another little clue is that when Goliath was, and the Philistines were battling Israel, David's older brothers were in the war, and David came to bring provisions, and they dissed David. They totally disrespected him and castigated him. So it doesn't seem like David had a lot of love shown to him growing up. And we've talked some about attachment styles in the past, and how the ideal is that you're securely attached to your parents, especially the first few years growing up. That helps create a healthy attachment style. And when you don't have that attachment to your parents, you have a insecure attachment style. And then you got to work. And so for those of us who have an insecure attachment style, I have a dismissive attachment style, that's tough. We got to work through that. And David had to work through that in his life. I'm convinced, because of this insight that he talks about his relationships with his parents, that he didn't naturally assume that there was security there. And even that impacted his relationship with God. That's the reason that he said, "Don't turn away from me. Don't hide your face from me." What do you think he felt about that with his parents? "Don't abandon me." Okay, so those were fears that David had that he had to work on, that influenced how he thought and how he operated. But he wasn't a victim of his family of origin. He was able to use that when God said, "Seek my face," he said, "Your face I will seek." And that he had to work through that. So, teach me your paths, O Lord, because of my foes and my adversaries and people that are out to get me. All of these difficult things in David's life were constant reminders of how much David needed God. And David's response was, "Teach me, lead me. I need you." Okay, here's wrapping up the psalm is my very favorite part. I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Okay, so this all relates to God's goodness, God's nature of who he is. So let's say that we're in the middle of dealing with anxiety. And we're like, okay, we've gotten into the Lord's tent. We're trying to get his perspective here. And so here's a question to ask yourself. Is God good? Okay, if that answer is yes, is he going to be good to me in this situation? So we're getting God's sight here. We're getting God's perspective. And then the third thing is, what would it look like if you would intervene? If you are good and you're good to me and you care about me, and I'm in a difficult situation, but you're going to help me, what would that look like? This is what happened when David hid in the tent and got God's perspective and then came out feeling more confident. So it's really us wrestling I would say the main thing when we are anxious and we're having a hard time quieting ourselves is this issue. Do we believe that God is good? Do we believe that God cares about us? Do we believe that he has the resources? Because anxiety comes when we don't feel like we have the resources to help. It's like, yikes, I'm stuck. I don't have the resources to do this. Well, the question is, are the resources there? Is God good, and is he going to intervene in our situation? That is the real question that we have to wrestle with. And if God is good and he works all things for good, we're going to be okay. He ends up, wait for the Lord, be strong and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. So it's interesting, when he came into the tent and he was fearful, he did not have courage. He was discouraged. And somehow, through him working this out with God, this is what David said, let your heart take courage. This is a process that we need to go through. If we can come to the conclusion that God is good and God's going to intervene on our behalf, we can get to the point where we're courageous. So I just found Psalm 27 very helpful in terms of kind of working through this whole area of anxiety. Okay, so let's kind of summarize, and this is on your handout here. What are practical steps if we're feeling anxious, instead of just saying, stop it? What might we do? So the first thing is awareness, being aware of what's going on inside of us. So it's paying attention to our emotions and paying attention to our body. So most of us do not pay very good attention to our bodies. And our bodies talk to us. And if we're got a bunch of health issues, what doctors say is it's not always the case, but oftentimes stuff that's going on the inside of us shows up in our health. And stuff that's going on, we carry anxiety and we carry stress in our bodies. And so if those, to pay attention to our emotions and stop and go, Lord, what is going on inside of me? That's like the first place to start. And the second is to name it. To say, okay, I think I'm in trouble. I think this is how I'm feeling. And the interesting thing about naming it is that instead of being in it, we step aside and we can look at it. So naming it is very helpful. And then, shalom my body. Now, from a brain science standpoint, when I talked a little bit before about the reptile brain, the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze. And when we're stuck in the amygdala, we're in fear and we're only thinking about survival, and we cannot have God's sight. And so the interesting way, as I said when we were doing these exercises, I don't know how box breathing and the tapping the vagal nerve works. I'm going to teach you one more, and this is called the Moral Reflex. All right, so here's how it goes. You take a big breath, almost like you're startled, and then you say, when I am afraid, I will put my trust in you, O Lord. So let's actually do that together, okay? This is called the Moral Reflex. I don't know who Mr. Morrow or Mrs. Morrow was or whatever, but maybe they invented it, I don't know. But, all right, so you take a big breath. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you, O Lord. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you, O Lord. One more time. Come on, raise your hand. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you, O Lord. So this seems kind of goofy, right? But it works when we're stuck in the amygdala and we have to get perspective. Somehow doing these 3 exercises, the box breathing, tapping our vagal nerve, and the moral reflex, is a way for us to instantly quiet ourselves and go, okay, now let's get perspective. Okay. Run and hide in God's tent, seeking to obtain God's sight. So it means, God, help me. God, are you good? God, do you want to show your goodness to me right now in this situation? And if you were to intervene, what would that look like? So you have this handout that you can take with you to say, okay, here's some steps that I can go through. And then this is really hard to practice appreciation when you're in the middle of it. But appreciation changes our mind from being obsessed about the bad to the possibility of the good. That's what appreciation does. And then build joy. So here's a question. Is God glad to be with me right now? And so to the extent that we can see, yes, he is glad to be with me, of enjoying that. And can I find other people who are glad to be with me? That's an important thing. I mean, I pray that each of you here has at least one friend that you can go to, that's the kind of friend that you can go to say, can I just tell you what's going on inside of me? And if you feel like you're short on friends, you know the old saying, if you want to have friends, be a friend. You know, and you know, there was an earlier slide about unhelpful advice, and sometimes our friends will be unhelpful and giving us advice, and you can actually, I'm going to give you a little clue, you can actually do this. It's called, and you can say, you know what I need? I just need somebody to listen to me. I do not need somebody to fix me. Now, my wife has tried to tell me that in her own ways over the years. I mean, maybe I'm kind of getting it. You know, us guys are really good at fixing, and we don't understand. Most of us don't understand that giving advice does not work. It's left brain solution to a right brain problem. So it's okay for us to train our friends and tell them what we need. You know, it's okay to just say, I appreciate your help, but would you just listen to me? So for you wives, you can say that to your husbands. But thanks, but I just need you to listen to me. And hopefully, if we understand how God made us, we'll go, oh yeah, thank you. It's so easy for me to fix, so thank you, I need that. And then point number 6 is this whole thing about Emmanuel Lifestyle. So there's like this days of trouble that we're in that are acute. But if we have this lifestyle where we're daily practicing gratitude and appreciation, and we're we're in community and we're building joy with people and we're learning how to quiet ourselves, maybe in the smaller things, so that when a bigger thing comes, like, okay, I've had some practice quieting myself, I can do this. And then this huge thing is the skill of listening to God and his perspective. And ideally, we're doing that every day. We're just taking some time to say, God, would you just listen to me? And I've shared this before. Just this 5-minute practice that I do is I go to a golden memory. I ask Jesus where he was in that golden memory, and then I ask him to speak to me. And I just get this, I can do all of that in 5 minutes. So the reason I keep it to 5 minutes is if it's 5 minutes, I can get it done every day. And just this practice of listening to God speak to me, it's huge. If we and so I would call this the Emmanuel Lifestyle. This is the stuff that if we do on a daily basis, when the day of trouble gets there, maybe it's not so big. Maybe it's not so overwhelming. Kind of a whole nother resource that I won't talk about a lot, but I put it in your notes, is Emmanuel Journaling. If there's a handout that we've used in the past that has these points, it's basically having listening to God when he says, I can see you, I can hear you, I understand how big this is, I'm glad to be with you in your weakness. This is getting what we need from God. And there's a reason that Jim Wilder, who put this together, did, is he understands what we need and what our brains need. So that is, so in summary, there's the Emmanuel Lifestyle that we do every day, and then in the day of trouble, how do we go to the Lord's tent and learn how to quiet ourselves? So we are going to do an exercise. If you're new here, what we do is we break into groups of 3 to 5 people and just talk about a couple exercises like, okay, this is nice, but how does it work? So the first question is, can you think of a time when you're mildly upset? Don't tell us the worst thing that ever happened to you. We might be a little overwhelmed if you did that. But if something that's mild, how were you able to calm yourself? And how did you do it? And here's a mulligan. If you haven't been able to do this, you could just say, well, if I did do a good job of it, I'm just going to use my imagination and say, how would it have been? And I do this a lot of times when I make mistakes. I go, okay, what I did wasn't good. If I were to replay that same situation and I were to do it right, how would I do it? It's crazy, but that is like a redo. We actually have a memory of what we would have done. That's helpful. And then the second one is, can you think of a time when you were afraid, like David was, you got with the Lord and you came out of it, you came into this situation where you were full of fear and you came out feeling courage. So if you don't want to participate in the exercise, that's fine. If you're in a group, you don't have to share anything. Maybe you just want to learn from others. And part of the reason we do this is we learn a lot from each other's stories. So listen up when other people are telling their stories about how they've been successful in doing this, because we can learn a lot. So anyway, let's take 10 or 15 minutes. Just can sit by somebody next to you or whomever, but a group of 3 to 5 people or so. And if you want to do these exercises, that'd be great.